Well, we have a chance of severe weather the next few days in the northern plains where it should be this time of year, and that pattern may stick around into next week. So we have an enhanced risk of severe weather here across South Dakota, Nebraska, eastern Wyoming, just where you might expect it to be pretty frequently this time of year, this peak of the northern plains severe weather season. And also a slight risk in Texas and Oklahoma, but the area we're really going to focus in on is Wyoming, Nebraska, and South Dakota. And this is climatologically speaking, probability of severe weather within a point, and yeah, it should be in the central and northern plains this time of year. So actually seeing kind of a normal pattern for a change. We've got a frontal boundary. This is showing the flow of air or streamlines, and you can see air kind of converging along this boundary. It is cooler north of this. Most places have been boiling in the heat south of that boundary all week long. This is going to bring some relief from the heat too, but also produce some pretty strong storms. We've got a big upper level trough. This is cold air kind of pushing eastward, and this trough is going to help really kick things into gear. This whole system has been kind of stalled to the west across the western and northern plains for the last several days, but that trough is finally going to kick things, get it moving. Also bring more instability by bringing that cool air aloft. So the area that we're watching specifically for tornadoes today, eastern Wyoming and far western South Dakota and Nebraska. This is looking like a pretty good bet that we're going to see some discrete supercells develop. Supercell index pretty high in that area, as well as the significant tornado parameter because we got shear, we got that jet stream that we've been talking about all week moving in. So when we look at the helicity tracks on the NAM model showing where it's forecasting storms with updrafts, it does line up with all that right in that area that we're looking at, eastern Wyoming into western South Dakota and Nebraska. So heading through the late afternoon, evening hours, storms pop. This might be a pretty late afternoon, evening event, and then these will all form into lines, bow echoes, and probably a mesoscale convective system or complex that'll bring some leftover showers to southern Minnesota Saturday morning, fizzle out, and then we're going to see that risk, that same area, move east and produce more storms potentially across southern Minnesota, Iowa, into northern Missouri. May not be quite as severe of an outbreak as what we see to the west today in South Dakota and Wyoming, but parameters are looking pretty decent, especially in Iowa. That's where the jet is going to be lined up better to have more shear. The significant tornado parameter kind of coming up here across Iowa, supercell index as well, and then where we see the most of those updraft tracks again into Iowa. But it is possible that we could see this activity move into southern Minnesota. That's why that slight risk is up there. So here's 4 p.m. Saturday, storms popping from the Twin Cities south into central Iowa, and we could have more storms developing later in the evening and overnight tomorrow night with some lingering showers on the backside, and then that same area of instability and the frontal boundary will move east more towards Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio River Valley. Slight risk of severe weather heading into Sunday. And as I alluded to, the pattern could stay more normal for June into next week. The jet stream is going to be one strong jet instead of to the south, a subtropical jet, and it is pointing at the plains into next week. So that's a key ingredient we need, and we will have some occasional instability, some of those higher dew points. This weekend, all that energy, of course, in the plains will be pushed south behind that front, but then next week, we're going to see that activity, that instability bubble back up into the plains and into Minnesota and Iowa. So severe weather, especially late next week, will again be a possibility. So that's what we'll be watching. Maybe we've turned a corner towards normal weather. We'll see.